again, it's Sandra Nardoni with Nimble Homeopathy, and I am here to talk to you today about part 2 of the history of homeopathy. And this is the part that I think is probably one of the more interesting things about this entire subject. Because where we left off is that Dr. Samuel Hahnemann had found that the Peruvian bark, which cured malaria, that if you made it into a tea and you drank it, you got the same symptoms as malaria if you were a healthy person. And that led him to the discovery of the law of similars. Well, as he began to experiment with this concept of like cures like, he discovered that if he were to treat a sick person with the substance that caused those symptoms, that he actually had more luck if it was very diluted. And so he started actually inviting his family and friends over and basically was like, hey, let's get sick together. And he would take substances that he knew would cause certain things, and he would dilute them greatly. Partially because some of the things that he was actually experimenting with, even though they were from nature, they were actually very toxic. And he wanted to make sure that he didn't hurt or kill any of his friends or family members. So he would greatly dilute the substances and see if they would still actually cure what they were supposed to cure. And he found that they did. And in fact, the more diluted they were, the more powerful they became as a remedy. And so what he ended up doing is proving that the more diluted the substance, it actually pulled away the toxicity of that substance and enhanced the remedial aspects of the same substance. So I think that is pretty amazing that he discovered that. And what he did was he would take these substances, he would have people over, he would have them, some of them actually took that substance and others of them did not. So he actually used a placebo, which I don't even know if that was a thing back then. I think he may have actually even created the concept of a double-blind study. Don't quote me on that, but I think that might be the truth. So he would have these people over, he would have them write down every symptom that they were experiencing. And that's how he figured out what that particular thing would cure. So if they wrote down that they, they took that substance and they got diarrhea and a headache and a fever, then he would know to write down that substance would cure those things if he had a patient that had that cluster of symptoms. So it was pretty amazing that he figured all this out, but that's how they did it. And he just, thing after thing, wrote down everything that particular substance created in a healthy person. And that is how he started treating his patients. And eventually he and his wife reopened a clinic. He, of course, had quit being a doctor. I believe it took him 18 years to come to all of these conclusions and discover this. And he and his wife opened a new clinic once he had discovered homeopathy, and they actually treated 100 patients a day. Isn't that amazing? Because all he had to do was know what it was they were suffering from, what the symptoms were, and he was able to actually give them a remedy that cured that cluster of symptoms. So it became an amazing thing that other doctors started catching on to. Now, of course, homeopathy from its inception has been a threat to allopathic medicine and to that philosophy. There's actually two very different philosophies that emerge as the competing philosophies of medicine. And as you might imagine, homeopathy is on one side of that, and our typical traditional medicine approaches today are on the other side, in the other philosophy. And I'll do a different video about that, but it's kind of interesting when you look at the history of how these philosophies developed and then who fell into what camp. But just to end this with some very telling information about how effective homeopathy was, even from the beginning when they didn't quite know everything that they know now. I don't know if I mentioned this, but Dr. Hahnemann was a contemporary of Mozart and Beethoven. And by the time in the early 1800s came around and Beethoven was in the throes of writing some of his most amazing pieces of music, he also was struggling with going deaf, and he had some other illnesses that he was really fighting. And he found a homeopathic doctor, a doctor that had studied the approaches that Dr. Hahnemann was putting out there, which at that time were very new. They were, you know, probably only in their second decade of use by anyone. And of course, very criticized by the powers that be that were making money off of the allopathic way of doing things. Beethoven had an illness that was causing him, by his own words, to cough up blood, and he was very, very ill. And in fact, they were thinking he probably was going to die. And he had a physician that he had been using who was a homeopathic physician, and that man came in and gave him homeopathic remedies for what he was struggling with and saved his life. And actually some of his, at least one of his string concertos that was written in the latter parts of his life, he actually dedicated to that homeopathic doctor who he said saved his life. He was, by his own words, he thought he was a day or two from death when this man was able to get to him and give him homeopathic remedies that saved him. So I thought that was an interesting little story to go along with the history of homeopathy and how it all works. Now, there are so many interesting things to learn about homeopathy, and I will be doing other videos to give you a glimpse into how things work. As I learn new things, I'm going to pass them on to you. So if you would love to know more, I have a newsletter that I send out once a week, and you can actually go ahead and put your name and email in, and then you will get a weekly email that has, it's not really a newsletter, it's just an email that will talk about one specific remedy and how you might use it in your own family. So as usual, just remember that this is just one friend talking to another. If you ever have any questions about any of this stuff, you want to talk to a medical professional. That's my little disclaimer. So have a great day, and I hope that this has been interesting to you and will help you in some way. Adios.